Hey, Erin, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on this show because you wrote an incredible new book that we're going to dig into just a little bit. And you have so much wisdom that can help out so many people in the area of personal finance. So we were super excited that you agreed to come on the show today. Before we dig into your wisdom, can you take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody that's tuned in and let them know what you're all about?
Absolutely. I am Erin Lowry, aka known as Broke Millennial, and I started a blog called brokemillennial.com about 4.5 years ago at this point. And really, it was just a place that I wanted a safe environment for specifically millennials, but really anyone, to be able to come and learn about personal finance with a very storytelling angle. So everything I do involves telling a story. And I grew up in a household where my parents were talking to me about money from a very young age. So when I got into quote unquote the real world, I was shocked how many people were just so stressed about money. And for reference point, I was only earning $23,000 my early year in New York City. And poverty line in New York City is about $19,000. So certainly wasn't living large, but because I knew how to handle my money and I didn't let money control me, I controlled my money, it wasn't as stressful as it could have been. So my goal became to make sure every other millennial, regardless of their financial circumstances, could have that same sort of empowerment. And now I have written a book called Broke Millennials, Stop Scraping By and Get Your Financial Life Together.
Now, I love the title. Of course, it's a play off your already popular blog and website and platform. Talk about how you formulated the concept behind the book.
The book is all unique material. So it isn't anything that I've just repurposed the blog and threw it into a book. The book has a pick your own financial path twist to it. So I actually encourage readers to jump around. Everybody's personal finance journey is different. And so I have tried to make sure every chapter stands 100% on its own. You do not have to read it cover to cover. And I want you to flip around. So maybe you are at a complete 101, have no background information, need to start in the first couple of chapters where we dig into your psychological blocks and we talk about how to budget and what a credit score is and all those real basic issues. Or maybe you kind of got all that down, but you want to know more about investing or planning for retirement or how to talk money with your partner. And these are all things that I get into throughout the book. And it's its own journey. I wanted it to cover from start to finish every touch point of the growing up millennial life. So you've got student loans all the way to I'm trying to buy a house.
Yeah, and you did a fantastic job covering a lot of territory in the personal finance space. This is definitely almost like the go-to manual for somebody to kind of get their finances in a great situation because you covered so many topics, and like you said, you can skip around and not lose yourself in the book, which is a fantastic aspect of your writing. Now, you kind of touched on at the beginning the fact that your parents were so instrumental by teaching you through life, really, personal finance lessons that allowed you to get to New York, right? A very high cost of living environment. And like you said, it's not like you were pulling down a six-figure income, but yet you were still living. You weren't just existing, you were actually living a good life. And you even had friends that made more than you, and they weren't. You talked about in the book how, they were stressed completely out because they didn't have the same type of upbringing that you did. Talk about the importance, because some people listening are parents, and talk about the importance of why your parents taking the time to teach you personal finance was so huge for you as you launched out into life as an adult.
Well, I'll start with a quick little story, and it's the origin story that I get into depth when we open up the book. And it's my donut tale. When I was 7 years old, it was the hot summer morning in 1996 in North Carolina. And I knew I wanted to make some money because from the jump, my parents never handed us money. So if my sister and I wanted something, then we had to come up with at minimum 50% of said thing. So it was 96. Super soakers were the hot commodity of that time. And I really wanted to get one. And so my mom was having a yard sale, and I came up with the idea that if I could sell Krispy Kreme donuts to the people that were coming to the yard sale, I could make a lot of money. So I asked my dad if he would drive to Krispy Kreme, pick up a few dozen donuts, bring them back, and also if he could cover the cost because I was 7, so I didn't have startup costs that I could cover. And he agreed. So fast forward, I've sold out all of these donuts, and my little sister helped me a little bit. And he comes over, sees about $20 in quarters on the table, and says, well, it cost me $8 to buy you the donuts, and then Kaylin worked for you for a little bit, so you owe me 8. Let's pay her 2, and your net profit is 10. And then it wasn't just that he told me that, he actually took the money. So I was learning right then and there, like, what? What just happened? And that was my first lesson in economics. And throughout my entire life, my parents were setting me up like that to learn with a very practical angle. Like, I think that's why I go to storytelling, is because it's the closest way that I can get somebody to understand it. And this went all the way through to college. I had to pay for 50% of my college education. And it's important to note that my parents financially could have covered it. And they chose not to because my dad thought that, one, we needed to have skin in the game. My sister had the same deal. But two, that it would make us value our education and make wiser choices about where we were going. And I still managed to come out debt-free because I went to where I got scholarship money. But my parents had set me up at such a young age to make more rational decisions that even as young as 18, I was thinking about the long-term ramifications of, if I get myself into debt and I want to be a journalism and theater major, well, how can I possibly survive if I've got $80,000 in student loan debt coming right out of school?
What are some financial areas? Because not only have you lived and learned, but you've also taught and helped tons of people live and learn to do better with their finances. What are some areas that you see millennials constantly tripping up in when it comes to personal finance?
Student loans is a biggie, and credit scoring is a biggie. Student loans specifically, it's so easy to just sort of set them and forget them, not only just taking out the max. I've known so many people who just took out as much as the government or a private lender was willing to give them, and then finance lifestyle costs in college with these said student loans. And if you think about buying a latte or buying lunch or buying drinks at the bar with student loan money, that's going to be so expensive because of interest rates and how long it takes to pay back. But it's not even recognizing the simple things like paying just $10 above your minimum due is going to shave so much time and so much money off of your repayment time. And that if you just set a plan in place and you're not just haphazardly throwing money at your loans, you can more actively get out of debt faster. And it's also not being aware of all the programs and options that are out there for you depending on your job and your income and your career. So that's one with millennials specifically, that understanding the student loan realm is very important. But credit scoring, and this is everybody, but I think that as millennials are phasing into needing to understand how to get their financial lives together, I call credit scores the insurance policy on your financial life. Because none of us want to have to borrow money. We'd love if we could just pay for everything outright in cash our entire lives. But the reality is, there might be a point where your car breaks down, you have to get a new one. It's imperative you have a car to get to work, and you don't have enough saved to buy one outright, and you need an auto loan. Or you want to buy a house, and you don't make enough to buy a house outright in your neighborhood. Whatever the cause, you are probably going to need to borrow money at some point. And the higher your credit score, the lower your interest rates. And so having that protection can really help, just a small piece of the puzzle. But what bothers me is there are so many myths about credit scoring. And one of the most pervasive one that really gets me riled up is this notion that you need to carry a balance on your credit card. And I can't tell you how many people, millennials and otherwise, I have spoken to who carry a balance. They carry debt thinking that's the right thing to do, and it's not. And just educating people about little things like that, and the way I feel like the banks have been getting you for a while. I want to make sure you know better.
Let's stay there for a second. If there's a millennial, anybody really listening that's looking to either establish or rebuild credit. Now, you talked about the fact that it's a bad idea to have a card for which you're carrying balances. What would you suggest that they do if they're trying to, like you said, they may not be where they need to be with their credit score? There's lots of mistakes that people are making with credit scoring. What should they do to kind of get some help in that area?
The simplest thing that you can do from the get-go is always make your payments on time. It doesn't matter what the debt is. Missing a payment is going to be one of the biggest ways you get smacked in the teeth. with your credit score. And that's one of the ways that a lot of millennials can kind of trip up as you bring that back to student loans, and they might not even realize that their student loan is due after college. Some people don't really pay attention. So you immediately are missing a payment, and that immediately crushes your score. The other thing is, let's say that you're in a great scenario where you haven't created any sort of credit card debt. Then the best thing for you to be doing is using no more than 30% of your total available credit limit. Even less than 10 is better, and paying it off on time and in full. Just that process. Now, for millennials who recently graduated college, you might find that you can't get access to a credit card. That happens sometimes. It's this weird catch-22 where when you're in college, they're like, hey, have credit. And then you graduate. Yeah, then you graduate and they're like, never mind. And what you can do in that case is get a secured card. And this is even a great tip for people who are in the midst of trying to rebuild their credit score. Doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum, if of age, I mean. So a secured card is basically a credit card with training wheels. You'll put down a refundable deposit, let's say often around $200. And then that way the bank kind of that mitigates the risk a little bit. They're not 100% sure about you. So you put down that $200 and then make one or two small purchases. I'm talking like less than $30 a month. Pay that off on time and in full. Keep doing it as your credit score goes up. You're eligible for better, regular, unsecured credit cards. You apply for one of those, get approved, shut your secured card down. If it's in good standing, you get your $200 back.
Love it. Love it. And you kind of touched on the other big, elephant in the room for a lot of millennials, and that's the student loan crisis that we are facing as a nation. And, a lot of people, they come out the gates, okay, graduated, time to be an adult. But there's this massive student loans that's got me stressed out. And you kind of touch on and really dig very deeply into in your new book. But just real briefly for those that are listening, are there some things they can be doing to make it more manageable, carrying the student loan? Because, as much as Ty and I preach, stay out of student loans, run the other way, some people have student loans. What are some things that they could be doing to kind of lessen the load that comes with student loans?
One is paying above the minimum. Like I mentioned earlier, $5, $10, even more if you can, makes a lot of difference in the long run. But in the short term, if you're just feeling so strapped for cash, you cannot figure out which way is up and how to handle them. Partially, it depends on if you have federal or private loans. Federal loans give you more options. You can look into things such as income-driven repayment plans, which is capping how much you pay per month relative to your salary. Now, the problem is with an income-driven repayment plan, if you stay in that, it can take 20 to 25 years before the remainder of your debt gets discharged. And even when it gets discharged, we're not totally sure what's going to happen at that point. You might end up with a really big tax bill. So it's a bit of a catch-22 scenario, but let's just say in the short term, you're struggling, you just need those payments to be a little cheaper while you're getting on your feet. Look into applying for an income-driven repayment plan for your federal student loans. And then maybe in the future, as you're making a little more money, you just start paying them down aggressively so you're not holding out for 2 decades or nearly 3 decades for them to get discharged. And then on the flip side, with private student loans, you don't have any of those kind of plans. But what you could look into is refinancing. Now, refinancing is really only for, I would call it the creme de la creme customer, in terms of you've got a high credit score, you have good employment history, you're making a decent salary, and you've been making payments on your student loans for probably 6 months or more, and you've never, ever, ever missed a payment. And what refinancing is it's taking out a new loan to pay off an old loan. So that sounds a little bit scary and weird. But the point of doing it is with refinancing, you are lowering your interest rates. Let's say that your private loan, let's say it's with Discover, and it's at 7%, and you refinance with a company, and they're offering you 3%. So you have $20,000 with Discover at 7%. These new guys are going to give you $20,000 at 3%. You use that money to pay off Discover, and then you're paying off your $20,000 at 3%. It's going to save you time and money over the course of repaying your loans. But again, it's kind of like shifting debt around. Sometimes it makes people a little bit nervous, and you really have to be in the best possible financial situation to even be eligible for those loans.
Love reading, but wish you had more time to get into your favorite books? What if you could use the time you already have and listen to the books you already love? Well, now you can with Audible. With Audible books, you can be inspired, entertained, and educated anywhere, anytime. Choose from the bestsellers in self-development, business, nonfiction, and more. So what are you waiting for? Your first 30 days are free. Visit hisandhermoney.com/audible to get started today. That's hisandhermoney.com/audible.
Wow. Great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. Another situation that comes across our inbox and people even tell us in person, a lot of them think that the answer to their current financial mess is more money. If I can get a raise, or I'm just waiting on that bonus, or I'm waiting on that tax refund check, and that's going to turn things around. What's your response when you hear statements like that?
Well, you should never be waiting for something like a bonus or a refund because, first of all, you're not entirely sure it's coming and you're not entirely sure how much it's going to be. So you never want to, pin your hopes on such things. Now, of course, there are two easy ways to get your finances in check. It's spend less or earn more, or both. But when we're saying earn more, we're not saying bonuses, tax refunds. We're saying learn how to negotiate and go into your employer and prove why you deserve to get paid more. Or we're saying pick up a second job, which to some people is not possible. That's not necessarily the answer. But to me, the ultimate answer is knowing the ins and outs of your cash flow. Know exactly how much is coming in, exactly how much is going out, where every penny you have is going, because you might not even realize how much you're wasting in tiny little ways, little habits. And a quick story I have on that, when I was my first year in New York City, my roommate, her name was Anna, and she really wanted to be a yoga teacher. And so she had to pony up for yoga teacher training. Now, she had a day job. She worked in insurance. And every day she would kind of get stressed mid part of the day. And she had this habit of going down to Starbucks and picking up a bottle of water. Like, not even going to Starbucks to buy a coffee. She would go buy one of those overpriced bottles of water. And it was just something that was habitual for her to get out of the office. She could have just gone for a walk. But we were talking about how she could free up a little bit of money. And I said, track every penny. Just spend 2 weeks writing down exactly how much you're spending and what you're spending it on every time you make a transaction. At the end of those 2 weeks, she came back. She goes, you will not believe how much money I've been mindlessly spending on water without even realizing it. It was almost $20 a week. That was like $80 a month that she freed up right there for yoga teacher training. And I think so many of us have our things. We have these mindless ways we're not even realizing that we're spending. So until you know your cash flow really intimately, and until you know exactly where all your debt numbers are, it's impossible to make an effective plan to get out of debt or to just get a general handle on your finances.
And another general handle that people don't have a lot of times is retirement. Millennials don't want to talk about retirement. That's way down the road. And we find that it's a struggle to get people fired up about making moves today that will give them the retirement in the future that they would be proud of. What can we do about that? How can we get more people to realize that it's what you do today that will set you up for a bright future?
I wish there were an easy answer to this, because so much of it is about changing people's mentalities. One thing that's a really quirky thing that you can do, though, this is totally true. A scientific study was done to see that if you see an image of yourself that has been aged forward, you are more likely to shift into a mindset of you in the future. So there are actually apps. I think one of them is called Aging Booth, where you can put a current picture of yourself in and then see a picture of like you at 60. Seeing that picture alone sometimes is just a little something that people can do to be like, oh, I got to get it together. What I would love to see happen is I would love things like opt-out 401ks so that you're automatically contributing and you have to opt out instead of opt in. But a big thing that I find happens across all ages is this frustration in maybe they're scared of the stock market is really a better term. And it's this whole idea of you start a job, you get the list of where you can be contributing into your 401k, and you see all these terms like large cap, small cap, Dodge and Cox. Like, what do these things mean? And so you just don't do it. And it is better to just randomly pick one and be putting money in and then figure it out in a little bit than to not be putting anything in at all. And the easiest thing that you can do is if you see an option for something called a target date fund, just be putting money in there until you want to kind of handle it more hands-on yourself in the future. Because what a target date fund does is it takes into account the year that you're thinking about retirement. Usually they're in increments of about 5 years, but let's say that you're looking to plan to retire in 2050 and you put money into the 2050 target date fund. It's going to start you off as a little bit more aggressive, and then it'll get you to more moderate and to more conservative the closer that you get to retirement. So it's a really easy way to remove that fear of what do I invest in? Just dump it into a target date fund, come back to it in a little while in the future if you want to have a more hands-on approach to how to handle your money, or maybe you hire a financial planner and they want to take a look at it.
There's a dichotomy that a lot of millennials find themselves in. They have this debt that they're trying to deal with, and people are also telling them you need to invest for the future. And a lot of times they'll ask us, should I focus on getting out of the debt? Should I invest and save? Should I do both? How do they go about making this decision?
You will never regret paying off your debt quickly, for sure. But if an employer-matched contribution is on the table, I always advocate people at minimum take the employer match. So let's say it's 4%, put 4% into your 401k, so you're getting that free money, and then focus every extra little bit of money you have on paying off the debt. I understand why people say there's no point in me saving for retirement while I'm handling debt. But the problem is, let's say you go on one of those income-driven repayment plans and you're not paid off until you're 45. That's a really late time to be getting into the game in terms of saving for retirement, because you've got about 15 years before you probably wanted to retire. And you're going to have to significantly double down, far more than you were paying on your student loan payments in order to be kind of getting ready. So just the other thing I like to have people play with, there are really great compound interest calculators. And there's one, if you Google the term compound interest calculator, I think it's usually the second hit. It's at like investors.gov. And if you just look at the difference between putting $100 away every month for 40 years at an 8% return, and then you look at trying to do $600 a month every month for 15 years, I'm telling you, starting early and small wins out every time. And it's just that starting the habit. I think the habit is one of the most important parts too.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. You articulated it perfectly. I hope everybody tuned in is going to take action behind what you're saying. And I think that the way you were brought up is so huge and so important and gave you such a good head start. But there are some people who were not blessed in that way and, are out here trying to learn this from the school of hard knocks when it comes to personal finance and trying to get their financial literacy up to par. What would you suggest to that person who's trying to figure it out, who didn't have those lessons coming up? How can they take action today to enhance themselves in this area?
Forgive yourself. You've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. Time to move on. I don't want you dwelling on them. I want you to move beyond them. I think another big part is embracing the fact that you're going to fail. Everyone does. You and I have failed, and we love money, but we're still going to trip up at some point. And when you do trip up, understand that maybe it's just because the method that you're using is not the right one to you. There are so many different ways to handle your money, and there's something out there for everyone. So I think budgeting styles is a great example. A lot of people will very adamantly say that I'm going to just throw out the zero-sum budget. They'll be like, the zero-sum budget is the only way to budget. It's the best way to go. It's the only one you should be doing. Maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe what works for you is doing a cash diet for 3 months, and then you're going to change it over and you're going to do percentage budgeting. You don't have to listen to what everyone in your life is doing. You have to find what works for you, but you still need to be taking control of your financial life, because there are two options here. You control your money or your money controls you. And you do not want to be in that second group.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, for somebody who's ready, right? They've been sitting here listening to you and they're like, man, yeah, I got to get it together. And the interview's coming to an end and I want them to take action. So what are a couple practical things that they should do once this interview concludes to help them avoid being a broke millennial?
First thing I want you to do is run your cash flow. It is kind of a fancy way of saying budget, but I want you to get out pen and paper, like actual pen and paper. I don't care if you're a millennial or not, and write at the top of that paper how much you have coming in every month. And then underneath, write every single bill that you have, down to dog food, down to groceries, down to, your internet, every single tiny thing. And then I want you to add a $100 buffer, because I guarantee you either A, you have forgotten something, because it always happens the first time, or B, there's some sort of charge that pops up, or maybe there's an annual fee on something that you forgot about. And then when you subtract that cash outflow from your inflow, you can see if it's a positive or a negative number, and it gives you a good idea of really what you're working with. And then I also want anybody with debt to do the same thing, write down every single little bit of debt that they have and really face those numbers. And save. That's my other big thing. Start saving. And my frustration is I hear a lot of people, especially broke millennials, say, I don't have enough to save, or there is no point in saving. The point is building the habit. And the reason I say that is even if you're only putting $5 away, which for most of the time, if you like craft beer, you can't even get a good craft beer usually at a bar for less than $5. But putting $5 away every single time you get paid, it's not about the amount so much in the beginning as the habit. Is that by the time you start paying down your debt, by the time you get paid a little bit more, you've got a little more discretionary income, it's natural to just be putting more into savings. Because this notion that, hey, I can spend all of my 20s not focused on saving, and then, when I hit 30, I'm just magically going to shift and start saving. Why the heck do you think that that's going to happen? That's not how life works. You can't go from being a couch potato to getting up and training for a marathon overnight. It's the same with your money. So I just want you to start building that habit, because the habit is the most important part.
Awesome. If perhaps there's somebody who is tuned in, loved your advice, but their situation in their eyes still feels overwhelming, and they're lacking a little confidence as to whether or not they can put the measures in place to get them in a better, more solid position financially, what words of encouragement would you offer to that person?
Find something that speaks to you. The fact that you're listening to this podcast right now already means you're on the right track. I think there are blogs, podcasts, books, TV shows, so many different ways that you can be hearing and getting great messages about money. But find an accountability buddy. It can feel really awkward for us to talk to loved ones about money, but I guarantee you there's somebody else in your life that's on a similar struggle. And find somebody that you can kind of partner up with and you can talk to about money. And that might be a spouse, it might be a friend, it might be a sibling or a parent. But having someone that you're expressing how you feel and that can kind of put you to task a little bit. Maybe you have a monthly meeting that you sit down and you say, here were my goals, here's where I tripped up, here's where I was successful. And somebody that's, keeping you accountable. It's a really great way to get started.
Awesome. So do me a favor, tell everybody again the name of the book, where they can pick it up, and how they can connect with you.
So the book is Broke Millennial, Stop Scraping By and Get Your Financial Life Together. And you can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you normally buy your books, or go into a physical bookstore and buy it as well. And then you can find me on Twitter at Broke Millennial, or at my website, brokemillennial.com, or on Instagram at Broke Millennial Blog, Facebook, also Broke Millennial. Just Google Broke Millennial and you will find me.
That's right. That's right. And we'll be sure to have a link to everything that Erin has mentioned, including her awesome new book, in the show notes of this episode. Just head over to hisandhermoney.com/podcast and you'll find it there. Erin, this has been super incredible and super helpful. We're so appreciative that you took time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and share your wisdom with our audience today. Thank you.
And thanks so much for having me. It was great to be here.